How soon before China takes over, Jen?
I don't know. I mean, if they really wanted to, they're not like us. They're not imperialist like we are. It's different. The way that they do it is very different than us. And again, there's a lot of issues there too, for sure. We've talked about that. We had a whole, God, I can't remember. We've been doing this for so long, but we did a show where we did talk about how China sort of goes into other countries, but in a different way than we do. Like we do it with military, they do it with economics, they do it with helping build infrastructure, but they have issues.
China is very astute in that the CCP understands how far they need to extend in order to get the job done. The problem in our country is that we never stop extending our arms or our legs. It doesn't matter. We'll go as far as possible. And the bigger problem here...
That's cultural, though.
It is.
China, they're much more insulated in terms of taking care of themselves and working on their own stuff.
They know to give, even though a significant portion of their population lives in poverty. You know what China has that we don't have? They have a real social safety net. They know that even the very, very bottom, they need to be taken care of. They need to have at least a minimal standard of living.
But you understand why, right?
Share with us, Jen.
Because like other nations, but even specifically East Asia, well, pretty much I think any Asians really, there's this better sense of caring for your elders, caring for older generations, the sense of a collective responsibility for each other and for your culture. And that is something that a lot of other countries have that we do not have here. And that's the thing, like there's just a greater care of the collective in places like China.
The problem, of course, that we're facing here in the United States is that a majorly significant portion of our infrastructure jobs, especially when it comes to anything that is technologically speaking, when you think about your phones, your computers, anything that can either be held in your hand or on your desk, is basically made in Southeast Asia, predominantly in China. And there are big problems with that. The biggest, of course, being that China is a communist country and they employ slave labor. And in our country, our attitude is we don't care who has to make these products. We are going to make them at the lowest cost possible for the highest profit possible because we do not have any semblance of a normal economic and political system.
I would suggest, though, what's interesting, though, is that we're talking about them using slave labor. Correct? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yes.
But we use slave labor.
Sure we do.
We are a whole country of slaves. Basically, they're slaves, real slaves that are the incarcerated people that are now basically that is the new slaves. And then there's the rest of us that are just slaves to capital. And just people like if you're just existing to live to just try to get by, I would suggest you're in the serf class and that is slave-like.
But this is one of the great points that Andrew Yang made regarding universal basic income. Technology is becoming artificially aware.
No one's talking about aspiring to be like China metal.
So what we are talking about is the fact that while jobs continue to go by way of AI, we are not in any way, although I'm sure it's the same situation in China, being compensated as a people for these jobs that no longer require manual labor, even though manual labor should certainly be welcomed if it isn't necessary, but it is contributing to the benefit of society. Who's actually benefiting? And that I have no doubt, because the story we're going to talk about real quick before we bring on our panel, Jon Stewart, who is a favorite of both of ours, who has always been a truth speaker and seeker for the populist left in the United States, is now again out of a job. And why is he out of a job again, Jen?
Well, apparently he crossed the line again. Apparently he crossed that line.
He crossed that line.
He crossed that line. So I can't, here's what I just said to Peter. Like, I don't even know what the dispute is. All I need to see is that there's a problem with Jon Stewart between him and Apple. I don't even need to know the details. And I know that I side with Jon Stewart over Apple. It doesn't matter what, and I don't even know the details of this, really.
Can we just take a moment to acknowledge Ars Technica, and of course, credit to a obviously a publication that I'm not familiar with, but the image that they chose to capture Jon Stewart with could not be more accurate. It's like
with the pen.
Tell me again how I'm wrong, because I know I'm not.
Yeah, I think the gist of this looks like Jon Stewart was wanting to put out some programming and some material that involved talking about China and AI. And we can't get too many details, which is really interesting, not surprising. But Apple, given that, I mean, to me, we know that Apple's made by iSlaves and they have a lot of business. They do all their iSlaves. They do their work in China. They have a lot of obvious interests there. They have all different kinds of things. So they were not too keen on that. And apparently they also weren't liking some of the guests he was wanting to have on, which I can only assume, again, were truth tellers of some kind. So this
could it have possibly been somebody who was a journalist in China who was going to expose the type of slave-like conditions that so many of the Apple workers have to go through in order to create the tech.
And the truth is, we can speculate. It could be innumerable things. Like, it could be many, many things. I honestly, it doesn't even matter to me.
Most of what the publications have written, specifically in Variety and the New York Times, have all written the same story.
They're censoring Jon Stewart. That's bad.
That it was creative differences.
Which is another way of saying censorship.
We are telling you what to say, and if you're not going to say it, then
we've had creative differences. Yes, we have the money, you have the creativity, and we're very different. So
the most important paragraph, which was not highlighted in any other article but Ars Technica, is this. Apple does much of its business, both in production and sales, in China, and has invested heavily in the country's infrastructure. It is well documented and has been for many, many years that Apple basically does everything in their capacity, not only to get their costs as low as humanly possible, but they do everything in their power not to pay any taxes either.
So this isn't so
regarding China, Apple execs may have been worried that Stewart's planned commentary could alienate customers or partners in the country. Now, what could that possibly mean?
I can't even imagine. What would Jon Stewart be wanting to expose? I don't know. It's a mystery.
That all of the executives get all of the money, that all of the shareholders get all of the money, that the reason why Apple has such an inflated stock value is because all of the value is going directly to the top and everyone below is basically getting nothing?
Could it
There's
be?
a reason they have to put it in another country. There's a reason.
Well, and you know that since it was originally there years ago when Apple left this country, a ton of people lost their jobs in Colorado Springs, and there were a couple other places, and they originally moved over to China. That they have had to since move their facility from where it first was because it was too close to like urban life and people could see how crappy the conditions were, and they were getting called out by like reporters or people that were able to find it. And then apparently they moved way further inland. So like somewhere way off the beaten path.
Here's the rub when it comes to the financial ramifications of Jon Stewart talking about this. As for AI, Apple has increasingly focused on AI for software features on the iPhone, not a surprise. Primarily, it uses machine learning to drive things like search suggestions, photography, and palm detection. You know how sometimes you're thinking about something and then magically it appears on your iPhone or your computer? Yeah, that's what this is all about. There have also been rumors that Apple plans to get into ChatGPT, and therein lies the rub, because this is all about money and power, nothing more. And that's what we always say. You know, anytime somebody's going to speak truth to power in this country, it's painfully obvious why they don't want us to hear about it, especially from the likes of Jon Stewart, who has a very large platform.
He has a very large platform, but I would like to put out there that, John, I would love for you to come and tell me all about it on my show. I'd love to hear all about what you have to say. Very much so.
Bottom line, we are a country that is heading in the wrong direction and have been for quite some time, specifically because, as Jen likes to say, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered.
And they just can't help themselves.
We are definitely in the hog phase and then some. And at this point right now, if we are not going to deal direct, and this is, again, what I have often said, has always been, no matter what the corporate media tells you, no matter what the scared, out of sight, out of mind liberals will tell you, the biggest appeal of Donald Trump in this country, which has been for the past 7 years, is him saying, we're totally going to fight back against China. They're totally taking our jobs. And of course, when you say that, what you're going to get is millions of people who have lost their jobs, their careers, and their livelihoods to a government that is owned by corporate special interests. And that's it. There's nothing more to it than that.
Serfs.
Now, that's the whole point. Now, do I think Donald Trump on the whole really gives a damn about the stiffs in this country? No, he cares enough about them to get their vote. But in terms of actually changing the economic and political infrastructure in this country that's necessary, no, I don't think he does. But then again, who right now really does?
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.